Unti, for having me today. My name is Deia Campanelli, and I have the pleasure of serving as Wabtec's Chief Communication Officer and Head of Sustainability. And I am absolutely thrilled to be here with you today to speak about a topic that is pervasive to us all as communicators, as employees, as leaders. And that is the importance of purpose in driving culture. As we look at the world around us, I think it's fair to say that great companies are forever transforming. You don't need to look far. You go look at Microsoft and the incredible cultural and strategic transformation that is underway at that company. At its core, Microsoft is helping every person achieve more. And in doing so, they are fundamentally rethinking the way that business approaches partnerships, they're redefining what it means to have a growth mindset, and they're developing the future generation of leaders who put empathy in action. You can look at Apple, which started making PCs in the 1970s and today is arguably one of the best known companies on the planet, selling billions of cell phones that we cannot live without and running the world's largest music store. These companies and so many like them recognize that disruption is everywhere. Every day, businesses are chasing technologies that are evolving at an exponential rate of change. And it's the companies that will write and shape the future who view transformation not as a solution, but as an ethos. It is the companies who embrace the power of purpose. So that raises a great question on the next page. What is purpose? As communicators, we fundamentally acknowledge that the purpose of an organization is its fundamental reason for being. It's the difference that we're trying to make in the world. It's about connecting people to the work we do and tapping into an employee or a consumer's idealistic motivations. And it gets at the deeper reason for an organization's existence beyond just simply making money. In so many ways, a purpose unites, right? It creates a social movement almost that starts with a compelling story and a common understanding that aligns people around a change or a transformation. It starts with committed leaders who utilize their unique vantage point to connect and to inspire people and to unleash new capabilities. And it builds momentum and belief that every action and every symbol and every behavior of a company and its people tells its own story. So to fully understand why storytelling and leadership and belief matter so much, let's just dive in. And I'll start with the importance of storytelling because it's such a hot topic these days and for all the right reasons. And maybe I start with a story. You may be familiar with a gentleman named Paul Zak. He's a well-known and respected author and scientist. And about 5 or 6 years ago, he published an article in the Harvard Business Review called, "Why Does Your Brain Love Good Storytelling?" And it was a fascinating piece that documented years and years of research on the connection between storytelling and human behavior. And in there, he noted that storytelling doesn't exist for mere entertainment. The storytelling actually chemically shapes feelings and beliefs and actions in one's mind. In particular, his research revealed that a powerful story releases a chemical called oxytocin. And it's that chemical that makes a person's brain stimulate the feeling of empathy. And you see this play out all the time. You see it play out in commercials or in stories and that motivate you to want to take action based on what you're seeing. And so given this connection between visual and story, it's no wonder that companies try to use the power of storytelling to motivate and to drive change internally. Unfortunately, though, a lot of them fail. And the question is why? And I think it's because folks are too focused on trying to convey a message, what we want people to know, and not focused on tapping into purpose and meaning to cultivate empathy. There are companies that get it right. I think a great example of a company that does it well is Starbucks. Starbucks could easily be described as a coffee company, but there's so much more than that. He wanted to position Starbucks as what he called that third place, the place between home and work that provides safety and protection and comfort. A place that's inviting, that is community oriented and where everyone is welcome. A place that offered something more than just what its lesser priced competitors may be offering, or even something better than the highest end coffee houses are offering. And it's that purpose that you feel and you experience every time you walk into those Starbucks doors. I would say the third the third home place also served as a true north in terms of crisis as well. You saw that play out a couple of years ago. You may recall when several years ago, a couple African American men were wrongly profiled and arrested in a Starbucks store, and that very act violated the company's purpose. So much so that the CEO immediately took action, closing down all the doors of all their locations and mandating that the company conduct racial sensitivity training. An example, an illustration point of purpose and story and action. And a great example of just leadership in the face of challenge. That's a nice segue to the next topic, which is leadership, right? If you Google leadership, which I happen to do this morning, you will receive 2 billion results for books and scholarly articles and other ancillary material that will appear in your search engine. And that's probably because leaders today face a really difficult task. They need to bridge the gap between what a company says and what a company means or does. And that say-do ratio for leaders is so important when it comes to purpose. Because if a company says that it's committed to innovation, then employees expect the leaders of that company to make time and space and investment to support new ideas, even during a downturn. And if a company says that it supports collaboration, then employees expect leaders to support cross-functional relationships. And if a company wants to move at the speed of the world around them, then you have to expect leaders to remove barriers, not create them. And it's when you have that disconnect between the message and the messenger that confusion and resentment and even resignation sets in. And it's in that very moment that purpose fails. And so with that, I want to touch on the third leg of this stool, which is the importance of symbols and rituals in reinforcing a company's purpose. Symbols, in my opinion, are one of the most powerful tools we have to demonstrate the truth behind what we're saying. They give substance to our words, they give meaning to our actions. If, for example, if you are a company and your purpose is anchored around sustainability, then you must fight every day to ensure that funding and R&D have no trade-offs that detract from your company investing in green products. Or there's some companies whose purpose is centered around knowledge. Then you need to ask yourself every day, how much am I spending on training and developing to create the best and brightest people? And everything communicates in terms of symbols. So whether it's hiring practices or budgets, investment choices, even your office design tells a story. All these things communicate symbolic messages about your company's purpose. And symbols are there, whether you plan for them or not. So it's important that you not only create deliberate symbols, but that you also avoid or understand accidental ones that could work against you or the vision that you and your leadership team are building around your stated purpose. On the flip side is rituals. And rituals are all about employee behavior. They're about how do you support leaders and your teams, and how do you give employees this true feeling of belonging. Rituals can be designed in anything. They could be part of your onboarding process. They could be how you hand out bonuses. They could be how you conduct training and development. This is an area where you can get really fun and creative as communicators as a way to drive understanding and support for your company's purpose. A great example of in a previous life of company that I was with, innovation was at the core of that company's culture. And so much so that the topic of failure, which in some companies is a taboo topic, was openly discussed. And in so many ways, it was even celebrated. And that's because the company knew that creativity and iteration had to coexist if innovation was going to be achieved. And so that failure was simply a stepping stone to developing what the next big breakthrough was going to be. A great example of symbol, ritual, and purpose all connecting in a beautiful harmony. With that, I thought I'd just share a couple closing thoughts. I think we all know purpose is powerful. At its most basic level, it expresses what an organization aspires to be or do. At its most advanced level, it becomes the conscious expression of how an organization intends to evolve or transform. I think that purpose is not passive. It's not even linear. It's transformational, and it reaps such tremendous rewards when applied and promoted in its truest form. I think you could look around at all the companies that I mentioned. You know, those purpose-driven companies, they attract the best minds. They have the most passionate customers, and they achieve wild success. But most importantly, those companies and their people truly change the world. So thank you so much for having me this morning. With that, Payal, I'll turn it back to you for questions.
Hey, Deia, thank you so much for that fabulous talk. It was incredibly insightful and just such a wealth of experience. It makes me even more excited about the conversation we have lined up for you now, because given the depth of what you've seen in the communication space across so many sectors, so many companies, I'm sure that the insights that you have to share with our audience are going to be even better once we double click on a few of those areas that you talked about. I know that we're running a very packed schedule, so I'm just going to jump right into those questions. And at the end of it, just feel free to also jump in and add in anything that you think I may have missed. So jumping into what is perhaps top of mind for everyone, which is the way companies and the culture and the way we work has drastically changed in 2020. As we know, almost everywhere around the world, companies have moved to remote working setups simply because there's no other option. But I think what we're hearing increasingly is that even after things settle down, hopefully next year, more companies would either like to continue to work remote or move into a hybrid working system. In such a scenario, what would you tell communication leaders? Like, what are the tools and skills they need in order to be very effective and impactful when dealing with distributed teams across the globe?
A great question and a timely one. I would say, for so many, the pandemic has been a time of stress, of anxiety, of uncertainty for people around the globe. And it's in times like that when the role of leader, whatever level of leader you are within your organization, play such a fundamental role in driving clarity and confidence and helping people manage through that uncertainty. I think for leaders, your fundamental priority needs to be delivering clear, consistent, and empathetic communications. Employees time and again tell us that they want to understand the actions that the company's taking, whether it's, how are you protecting the health and safety of your team? What is the vitality of your business? How are you and your broader supply chain being impacted or responding to the pandemic? What does this mean for the financial outcome of your company? And more importantly, just want to feel connected, right? They want to feel connected to their leader. They want to feel connected to their customer. And they want to feel connected to the strategy and the purpose during such a time of unprecedented disruption.
Deia, what's your key advice to leaders when communicating in a crisis? And of course, the crisis could be what we are facing right now, but I think as communications professionals, we're dealing with crisis day in and day out. And one of the things that we've seen that's often been debated in the press as well is how leaders are communicating to their employees when they're making very hard business decisions, especially. How can a leader ensure that they maintain the very necessary skills of empathy and kindness while at the same time realizing that they sometimes have to make those tough decisions when it comes to their business? Like, how does one balance this out in the communication scenario?
Yeah, Pal, such a great question. And listen, I think there's a couple of big lessons that we've learned throughout this crisis. I'm sure you have some that you could share as well. But I think first and foremost, you have to err on the side of more communication versus less. I don't know about you, but this pandemic is very isolating. And I think that employees are so desperate to hear from their leaders and hear from them often. So I think making a conscious effort to schedule meetings, use technology such as this to connect with your employees, purposely just check in on them and see how they're doing, ask questions, but more importantly, listen to what they're feeling and what they're experiencing. I think maybe, going back to the previous presentation, I think this is a time when companies need to know and embrace their purpose. During times of uncertainty, employees tend to, their perspective narrows or they retreat in and they can become very focused on themselves or their immediate needs, and that's perfectly understandable. But I think we need to help employees stay focused on the company's purpose. We need to help them understand the impact that their effort is making in the face of change. And honestly, we just need to articulate it in a clear, consistent, and inspiring way. And I think the other thing that leaders need to do is, in times of great change, you are not going to have all the answers, and that is okay. But you need to be open about what you know. You need to be open about what you don't know, and you need to be transparent in how you're going to navigate this challenge or crisis together.
So you've been at the absolute forefront of change, just following the merger of Wabtec and GE Transportation, and this created a Fortune 500 company. So the scale at which you've seen business transformation is truly remarkable. What are some of the key learnings that you can share with the audience today? What's your advice to communication professionals who are right in the center of change and business transformation? What are the key do's and don'ts that you think that they need to keep in mind when dealing with similar situations?
Yeah, well, I'm a huge believer in open and transparent communication as a key to driving successful business transformation. I think that that is essential to not only driving the business strategy, but being aligned to it, right? And so our job as communicators is to bring the life of the company's long-term vision and goals to life. And business transformation can certainly be uncertain from employees, especially in times of change, like we just discussed. But I think this is a time when words and actions matter, and when your actions have to match those words. So I guess my advice in any business transformation, a merger, a crisis, an evolution, is that you have to be honest and transparent. You have to address the changes and the uncertainties and the challenges that you are facing, and you need to consistently lead and communicate with purpose.
Now, jumping into what I think is one of my most favorite topics, all my life I've dealt with many multicultural teams. And I've always been fascinated with the nuance with which your communication strategy and framework needs to change, just like from every country and every stage of a company that you're working with. What do you think goes into building a really strong culture communications and engagement framework? Especially when one has to deal with multicultural, multi-geography teams, which I suspect is going to be even more true of 2021, harking back to our distributed teams question. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah. So we are a multinational organization, and I think if ever there was the year for the internal or cultural communicator, in driving employee engagement, this is it. The pandemic has proven that in spades. And I think the most essential role in driving cultural communications hinges on a couple things. One, the role of connector, right? Good internal communicators are focused on not only getting the word out, but connecting the dots between strategy and operations, performance and culture in a way that gets people excited, gets them involved, and gets them invested in what the bigger picture is. I think it's also about helping teams interpret the cultural landscape at a hyper local level. Especially if you are operating in regions around the world, you need to help your employees understand in that market what this company stands for, who it values, and why your mission matters. And then maybe lastly, I would say I think the role of cultural communicator is incredibly valuable as serving as the conscience of culture and fostering engagement. And what do I mean by that is, like, you need to create room to listen. You need to create room to collect feedback, to push back, to encourage public debate of issues and ideas across the organization in order to foster the culture and engagement that you're looking to get out of that team. And so again, I think this is the year of the cultural communicator, and I'm curious to see just the valuable and impact that this role is going to make on organizations going forward.
So you've led both internal and external communications for your companies. I've tried my hands at both, and I must confess that I fell more in love with external communications than in internal. But in our community, they're passionate supporters of both streams. Which do you find more exciting, and why?
Um, Well, listen, I don't think it's ever one or the other. I think it's both. For my company, as I said, I'm part of Wabtec Corporation, and it's a very exciting time. We recently completed a major merger and are integrating teams and products and processes and capabilities at a pace of change that is just remarkable. But even more exciting, we've created a company with a powerful purpose and a singular vision, and that is to literally move and improve the world with our technology. To give you some perspective, Wabtec is a leading equipment provider, as well as digital solutions and other ancillary solutions and innovative services. And we today move roughly 20% of the world's freight. So think about things like the food on your table, the lumber, the health supplies that are so needed in today's crisis. We also literally have equipment on every major transportation system on the world. And so if ever there's been a need to move and improve the world, to do it cleaner, safer, more efficient, it's now. And so having the ability to be able to anchor that purpose to the stories that we're telling internally and externally is so powerful. It allows us to focus on how we're driving innovative new technologies. It allows us to celebrate the people and the solutions and the investments that we're making in our own talent pool. And it allows us to be responsible citizens in terms of how we're reducing our own carbon footprint. So I don't think it's a one or the other. Telling that story as a communicator internally and externally is so important, and being able to do it for a purpose-built company is just very exciting.
What are the key trends in cultural communications that have caught your eye in the last few years, and especially this year?
Good one. I definitely think that video is going to take on new directions over the course of the next 12 to 18 months. I think in the wake of COVID, you're going to see more internal communication campaigns with less content, probably more focused on building audiences and conversations, especially when it comes to leadership communications and this need for leader to many dialogues. I also think you'll see the use of live video continuing, and I don't mean just Zoom and Teams, although I do think that those platforms have truly transformed the way that businesses collaborate or would have thought about collaboration over the last 9 months. But I definitely think that companies will use live video in a more authentic way, sharing their stories on social platforms, maybe replacing some of the overly polished or corporate videos that they've used in the past, and really just embracing video as an authentic tool to reach a disparate grouping of audiences.
And my final question is perhaps a age-old debated one, but that's key to all of our profession, is reputation management. You know, a lot has changed in terms of how we look at reputation management, specifically in a digital world. And how do you see this key aspect of reputation management evolving in the next few years? And what are some of the key trends that you think will emerge that we should all keep our eye out?
I think in the next 5 years, you're definitely going to see a greater commitment from brands to address either societal change or environmental change, healthcare change, and a greater willingness of business leaders to actually be out front on those issues. I think 2020 has shown that consumers expect brands not to sit passively on the sidelines, but rather to take an active stance on those societal and environmental issues. And I think the next 5 years, we'll see that play out in magnitude. It'll become the standard, if you will, not the exception, for how all businesses of any size really leads on those important topics.
Well, Deia, that was incredibly insightful, and I'm sure the audience thinks so too. I realize we've come to the end of our session. So with that, I would like to take everyone's leave, and thank you so much for taking the time out for our conversation today. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.